Thank you for staying with us. Earlier, we brought a recap of the president's speech, which he gave earlier this morning to address the scarcity of the Naira. And from that speech, we gather that President Muhammadu Buhari has extended the deadline for the old 200 Naira note by 60 days, which began from the 10th of February 2023 up until the 10th of April 2023. He says this is to ease the burdens on Nigerians in terms of access to Naira notes, while noting that old notes, that's the 1,000 Naira and 500 Naira notes, is no more illegal tender, and existing ones can be redeemable at the Central Bank of Nigeria and designated points. Well, joining us to discuss this new development is a political analyst, Biodun Shomi, who joins us in the studio. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Right. Well, we have joining us via Zoom columnist Sam Omatseye. Good morning, Sam. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Right, let me begin with you, Sam. The president says his government is respecting the rule of law. Would you say that from this statement, the president has respected the rule of law, knowing that the case is still at the Supreme Court?
It's amazing that we'll have a president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria who swore on assuming office that it was going to respect the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And very fundamental to the operation of that Constitution is the separation of powers. And the separation of powers means, which was, an idea from the French philosopher Montesquieu, over a century ago, that these three branches should operate on different spheres, and what the Supreme Court stands for is law. Is that the Supreme Court is the custodian of the interpretation of that Constitution, which is the law, and whatever the Constitution says is what the Supreme Court is supposed to advance. And once the Supreme Court says something, it is therefore law. So even if you are the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, it is an act of constitutional humility that the president bows to that law, because that law represents the collective sanctity of the Nigerian people, of the citizenry. And once that law has been pronounced, the president now comes down under that law. What we saw in this broadcast is that the president has elevated himself above the law by saying that we cannot no longer use the 500 Naira bills and the 1,000 Naira bills as legal tender, whereas the Supreme Court has issued an interim order saying that all three notes, 200, 500, and 1,000, should be used while we await their determination of the substantive suit. So what the president has done is to bring a certain military mindset into a democratic society and to tempt Nigerian people to defy the law, which is, in a sense, a very dangerous trend from a man who was voted in by the people and not by the army.
All right. We'll put you on hold, Sam, and we'll continue the discussions here in the studio with Biodun Shomi, and then revert to you for more of your contributions. The president noted in his address that certain pronouncements were made at the Supreme Court. He acknowledged that the matter was in court, the apex court of the land, as rightly posited by Sam Omatseye online. What do you make of this latest intervention of the president, while a matter of this nature is still subsisting in court?
Well, to start with, the president and all Nigerians are expected to comply with the provisions of the Constitution. Nobody is above the law. The basis of democracy, in fact, democracy itself is predicated on the rule of law. And therefore, anything that detracts from the rule of law undermines democracy. In this situation, this very particular situation, we have actions filed in court on the issue of CBN changing the hold notes and then imposing a deadline without redeeming the value of the currency. In violation, strict violation of CBN Act, Section 20, clear violations of the Act, which did not impose any time limit, particularly if you check Section 20, subsection 3, any time limit for changing the currency. Anytime you surrender the currency, you are supposed to be given the face value of it. Yeah. So there was no time limit in it. And then this issue has gone to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in its wisdom, has decided, to stop government dead on the tracks, mindful of the fact that, the Chapter 2 of the Constitution, particularly Sections 13 and 14, in fact, 13 to 24, on fundamental objectives and directive principles of social policy, clearly mandated the government that the security and welfare of the people, is the purpose of government. And that's clearly explicitly stated in Section 13, under that Chapter 2. So the Supreme Court had waded in and said, look, hang on a minute, both parties, you need to hold action, let the currency continue to trade until we determine the case. So we now have a situation where Mr. President is saying, well, it's giving a different version of it, on one part, complying with the directive of the Supreme Court, and in another part, refusing to accept that decision. What I mean by that is this. The president is saying 200 Naira will be okay to be used.
Old and new.
Old and new. But on 1,000 Naira and 500 Naira will not. So on one part, the government is able to say, well, we have complied with your decision, with your ruling. And in another breath, they are also doing what they want to do. And one of the reasons given by Mr. President in his address, clearly, is that the fact that over 2-point-something trillion was kept outside the banking system. For me, this is no-brainer to know why money is outside the banking system. They keep saying politicians. That is not correct. 45% of Nigerians have banking facility. That is not my figure. That is CBN figure and IMF figure. You can please check it out. If you have 45% of Nigerians with banking facilities, where are the remaining 55% keeping their money? Right. Basically, it means they are keeping it at home. And if an average person, and that gives you about 105 billion Nigerians, if an average person in the rural areas with no access to banking facilities, only has 10,000 Naira a month, multiply that, you already have over 1 trillion Naira, which will be outside the banking system with farmers, with petty traders, with people in the rural areas. So it's no brainer. We don't have the banks. We don't have bank branches in rural area. If you don't, look, you can check this out. Aton is a town of 60,000 people. There's no one bank. Aton, Tania, Songo here. Not one bank branch in the place. So where do you expect them to keep the money? So attempts to blame this purely on politicians, for me, will not wash. The fact of the matter is you will always have some money outside the banking system. And what the CBN is doing, and by extension, federal government, to say that I have deposited money and you will tell me how much I can withdraw, when in reality it's a contract between myself and my bank. If I pay you 10,000 Naira deposit to hold on my behalf, and you are charging me some interest to manage my money, when I demand for my money, I should be able to have it. So in any case, even if, let us even give, without concealing, that in reality, some politicians do keep some money, at home. After all, the CBN governor introduced some curbs to say that, look, you cannot withdraw more than 20,000 Naira. Yes. You cannot withdraw more than 100,000 Naira for a company, for an individual in a week, and for a company, 5 million Naira. So when will you be able to amass 1 trillion Naira, which the alleged politicians are keeping at home? The fact of the matter is, the Nigerians are being railroaded into online transactions without a proper and solid IT architectural base that would drive it. We all know what has been happening since this problem started. The network has been collapsing left, right, and centers. People are not able, even to carry out transactions regularly using the online transactions because we do not have a robust system that would drive it. So it is not enough for CBN to say we are going to change Naira notes. Before you change the Naira note, you redesign it and drive people towards online transaction, you must make sure that you have a robust IT system, data system that would support it. That we don't have currently. So it just does not make sense what is really going on. But I honestly think Mr. President, in his wisdom, may want to look at the whole issue again. He may have been misled, by those who have a third agenda.
All right, this matter of being misled has, also generated controversy, but that will not be my focus for Sam right now. We'll come back to that. Now, Sam, yesterday we got wind of this development. There were reports that the governor of Kaduna State actually said this proposition was made to them that the 200 Naira notes should be injected back into the system, and they rejected it because they said the federal government had asked them to withdraw the matter in the courts. And recall that before yesterday, the state governors, some of the state governors had insisted that the whole 1,000 Naira, 200 Naira, 500 Naira notes should be accepted. Some had even clamped down on some businesses in their states. What do you see going to play out as moving forward now that the president has come out to make this broadcast?
Well, that is yet to be seen, because the assumption is that because you say everybody should have 200 Naira notes, the rich people always go around with 1,000 and 500 Naira notes, and the poor people go around with 200 Naira notes. This is a very naive and very, very unreflective thinking. For you to think that, okay, now that you have 200 Naira notes, only the poor now can have it. It is very uneconomic. He has no sense of understanding of the society he presides over. With all due respect, he has no sense of the society he presides over. To say that 200 Naira will not go around. Let's see what even those other 200 Naira is talking about will be accessible in the banks. Whether there will be no run on the banks as a result of that, so that people do not carry big bills of 200 Naira notes, 200 Naira notes, and going all over the place. Let us see how that plays out. And there's no two ways about it. The Supreme Court has said something, and the president has said another. What does that mean? It means that if a court says that somebody has stolen and a person should be remanded in court, somebody has a right to say, no, I cannot do that because the president has said the courts do not matter. This is fundamental to our democracy. What we are saying here is that it means that the rule of one man is better than the rule of the people. What is the implication? It's a bigger implication than even the idea of Naira notes, the idea of whether we have money in circulation or not. The fundamental principle of this republic has been called in question by the decision of the Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That is the implication of what we have just listened to this morning, that our democracy doesn't matter, that the people don't matter, that the system doesn't matter, the courts don't matter, only Aso Rock matters. Yesterday, the story was put out there by the governor of Kaduna State, N500, through his chief press secretary, in which he said that people are saying that let us do 200 Naira notes, and that the 500 and 1,000 Naira notes have been burnt down. Let us see the picture of the bonfire so that we can look at it.
All right.
Maybe we will see a picture like that in Shoyinka's book, the bonfire, very beautifully written about how bonfire was made of of some buildings in the Plateau area, and so on and so on. You will see that picture of smokes going everywhere where the money has been incinerated. But the man says, no, that the money is actually in the vaults of the commercial banks. I've not taken that there. And the other thing he said was that the presidency believes that it's the bank officials that are holding the new notes. How much can the bank officials hold? When you have over 2 trillion taken away from circulation, and you want to replace them with, we don't even know how much, because only the central bank has not told us how much
400 or 300 billion
back to the banks. They said 300 billion, but we don't even know. Where is the 300 billion? Where is it? How much did you give to GTB? How much did you give to First Bank? How much did you give to Senate?
Right.
Tell us how much you gave to Zenith. In his own Zenith Bank, there was a run on the headquarters of Zenith Bank where Emefiele was MD. Yesterday, the headquarters.
Right. We
should understand that what is going on here is a fundamental thing. It has nothing to do with any other thing than the fact that the president has undermined our democracy.
All right.
Right. All right, let's put you on hold now, and then come back to the studio for more on this. Still on this this suit at the Apex Court of the Land. It's interesting, though it has been said that this is a fundamental issue. We really need to address this fundamental issue about the order of the president versus the order of the courts. Now, which will precede the other, which would, because when you look at a state like here, for example, in Lagos, where the government has already said, Governor Sanwo-Olu has already said, do not reject any Naira notes. And now that we are saying that certain notes are no more in circulation or are no more legal tender. But that's on one hand. On the other hand, again, is this suit. Lagos has now joined as a plaintiff at the Supreme Court on this matter. We're seeing at least 9 APC states who have sued the federal government versus the federal government that is now being joined by Edo and another state now that are, PDP states.
Bayelsa
and Edo. How does this, pan out for you?
Well, it's a very interesting development. I mean, when you have people in power who swore to uphold the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as stated clearly, through so many mechanisms, including in Chapter 2 of the Constitution of Nigeria, 13.1, where it is stated clearly, 13.1, that all persons and all authorities exercising judicial, executive, legislative powers in Nigeria will observe and conform with the provisions of the chapter. It's stated, that's exactly the words in 13.1. So, and then you have Mr. President or some other state actors, including governors, choosing to do something else, different from the purpose. And particularly when you further go down and that you realize that in 13.2, that the primary purpose of governance is the security and welfare of the people, clearly stated. And that is the primary purpose of governance. Security is breaking down gradually.
But the president mentioned that he's committed to that.
Yeah, well, you have no reason to doubt that. But there's something creating problems for everybody. You have collected 2.7 trillion naira depositors' money, and then you are replacing it with 400 billion naira. It is no brainer that there will be scarcity. And when people can have access to their money, they can feed. The poor traders are there. And think about the 14 million Almajirist kids who depends on handouts, on the goodwill of people working on the streets. They have no means of livelihood now. Nobody to help them. We don't have any welfare benefit in this country. Chapter 2 on fundamental objectives and the directive principles of social policy is not enforceable, is not justiciable. So where do we leave our own people? What about people living in the rural areas? What about in the riverine areas? There are places in Delta State that you go on Kano for 3 hours before you can get to those communities. They don't even know what is called bank. What would happen to them? Are you going to bankrupt them? We have nomadic farmers,
so the governors
including
are
herders in the bush.
The governors are justified despite their party affiliations. That's what you're saying. The governors are justified.
Look, it's not. I'm not surprised that in Edo State, for instance, we saw a huge public disturbance, on the streets with fatality yesterday, because the governor is choosing to defend what apparently clearly is an illegal, it's an infraction of the Constitution, of the CBN Act itself, CBN Act 23, subsection 3. It's a clear infraction. You cannot impose a deadline and say that people cannot redeem the value of their money. In fact, it did not state any time frame. The way it is worded, clearly worded, there is no time frame. So at any point in time when you take your old Naira notes to the bank, they are supposed to redeem it, to give you the face value of it. If it's 10 million Naira, they're supposed to give you the 10 million. It does not matter whether it's 50 years' time. That is what our law says. So nobody can, in his own right, decide whether as the governor of the CBN or in any capacity in Nigeria, and then impose a time frame not imposed by the Constitution or by any act of the Parliament. And that is exactly the crux of the problem. So when you have governors queuing behind an obvious illegality, that is very worrying. For many people, it means these governors are not mindful of the pains their people are going through. You just go on the street and see, the frustrations on people's faces. They are not begging government for any welfare benefit. What they're saying is, look, you ask us to deposit our money. We trust you. We deposited the money in the bank, expecting to collect the face value of new notes, which you have now failed to give us. You told us to go and do online banking, but you do not have the IT infrastructure, to drive it. You only need to move about 10 kilometers, just even 5 kilometers after Ogunshun River Basin Authority in Ogun State, in Abeokuta. There's no internet connection. Even to make voice call is difficult. All the thousands of people living in that area, how are they going to do online banking? Have we developed a proper IT, to drive it? One, is it reliable? Two, we have even seen how the system is so overwhelmed now that they're just crashing anyhow. So I don't think we need to...
One would expect that the CBN governor will have an idea of all of these matters you have reeled out, because just yesterday he had a meeting with some persons, the diplomatic corps, and he still insisted that there was no need to even extend the date.
Well, I gathered from somebody who is in the diplomatic corps in Nigeria, an ambassador, a friend, a very close friend, that one of the diplomats spoke to him, and then he was laughing. He asked him whether Emefiele was actually an economist, and he said no. He came from the banking sector, and he said that was the biggest problem your country created for yourself. How could you bring somebody from the banking sector and make him the governor of your central bank? You need an economist. He's only going to pander to the banks, and that's exactly what is happening. So Emefiele does not even think, I don't think he realized how it's being perceived. He drove our forex to what it is now, and is doing exactly the same thing with the economy. He's in charge, the CBN is in charge of the monetary policy, the Ministry of Finance is in charge of the fiscal policy. It is quite unfortunate that we find ourselves in this situation. The moment Emefiele, for the first time in our history, came out and said he wanted to contest election on the platform of APC as presidential candidate, we also saw thousands of vehicles which were branded in his name. He even had the audacity to go to court to test the legality of his holding on to his job as CBN governor and then be an aspirant. That is when Mr. President should have fired him. Mr. President did not do so. And Emefiele was left bruised and wounded. And he was left in charge of the CBN. Don't forget that all the electoral materials are kept in CBN vault. And this governor, who is supposed to be independent, obviously came out and said, look, I am partisan. I want to go partisan. Then he has no business being there again. So that is why quite a lot of people are reading meanings into it, political meanings into it. That, look, this is a kind of revenge to make sure that he would scuttle the whole process. That may be right. That may be wrong. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, there's a basis for it, no matter how you look at it. And this is where I think Mr. President should have been more cautious and then, scrutinize advice and policies, new policies from Emefiele, particularly towards election, because it has created enough pains, enough trouble in the whole country. And my worry at the end of the day is that Emefiele has damaged the banking system almost beyond anyone's imagination. I cannot imagine that I will not keep money at home now. We have created an economy where people can no longer trust the banks. Nobody knows what the government will do tomorrow. At the end of the day, you will realize that many people will now resort to keeping money at home, particularly in the rural areas where there are no banking facilities. They will not even bother to try and have any bank account. So what have we gained? Right. How would this increase our GDP?
Right. And now we're not even going to get to that point, even here in urban areas, for example. I've spoken with one or two people who have said that before the president made the latest directive, they were spending the old notes, but keeping the new notes. How they're getting them, they said so, but they are holding on. So at the end of the day, how much of the new notes do we even have in circulation? And if what you say is true, that the governor of the central bank is pandering towards the wishes of the banks, but then the president has also acknowledged that there are people, there are saboteurs within the banking industry who are anti-government policy.
Some should react to that.
Yes, and of course the president's address was not bereft of the polls that are upon us next weekend. We have crucial elections into the office of president, National Assembly. How do you see this in terms of implications of this latest directive and the polls?
Let us wait and see how it's going to pan out. We still have time for people to digest what is going on, for CBN to see whether it can get everything going on. But what we have noticed here, for one, we have a crisis of federalism in our hands, which affects our democracy. We have a crisis of federalism where states are taking the center to task about it. We have the problem of judiciary. But fundamentally, this is a human rights crisis we are suffering in Nigeria, where people cannot feed, where people cannot get treatment, where people die because of a policy. It is not just a technicality. It is a survival issue. And from what the president has done, also on the list of endangered species is democracy. So we have to see how all of this is going to pan out in the coming days. But this is a time for the political class to come together and make a statement for this thing, because the political class has also become an endangered species in this equation, where two of the major contenders for presidency see what is going on as inconvenience, and even little inconvenience, adjectival inconvenience. So when they see it that way, this is time for them to come out and also talk on this matter, because people are dying, people are suffering, and they are keeping quiet. This is a very critical moment in Nigerian democracy. This is a very critical moment in the life of this republic. This is a very critical moment in the survival of many Nigerians. If you say 200 Naira notes should be put in circulation, let us see how this will pan out. Because 200 Naira notes are very little currency. And what it means is that those who are supposed to collect 1,000 will collect 200. Those who collect 500 will collect 200, because people are not seeing the new notes.
All right.
And
we need to wrap things up now.
In the president's speech that the new notes are everywhere.
All right.
But the point is that they are nowhere.
Sam, we need to wrap things up now because our time is up. But we must thank you, columnist Sam Omatseye, for your contribution on the show, as well as political analyst Biodun Showumi for your contribution on the show this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We do hope that we'll see developments in the coming days with regards to development from the president's speech. But let's